many of you have seen my Latin talk yesterday? Okay, good. So I can skip some of the jokes. My name is Giuseppe Maxia. I come from Sardinia. This is why my surname doesn't sound like the way it's written, but don't worry about that. This is the matter from another talk. I also know as the data charmer. I have been an active member of the MySQL and Perl community and basically playing with open source for many years. I have a blog that is datacharmerblogspot.com, where you can find pointers for this talk and other things related to this talk. Don't worry about taking notes about this presentation. If you want to get the full slides, you can find them at tinyurl.com shoot-cl-2010, and I will repeat this slide at the end of the presentation. If you have Twitter and you want to give me feedback, my name on Twitter is DataCharmer, so just send me a message saying how much you liked or hated this presentation. So let's go through what we said yesterday during the Latin talk, that this is a story about languages. It means that we use language to talk to computers. Sometimes we use the wrong language, trying to patronize our computers in our native language, but most of the time we use computer languages to talk to computers. Now, computer languages are good and bad. This one is bad, and I will talk to you about the good ones. I'm a polyglot. Polyglot means somebody who speaks many languages. Now, speaking many languages can be perfect polyglot or imperfect polyglot. I'm the imperfect type. So I speak Italian, but as my colleague knows, my Italian is very heavy with Sardinian accent. I speak English, and if you can tell where I come from, okay, I have an Italian accent as well. And the same thing happens with computer language. So I speak Perl, and since I was using C for many years, my Perl sometimes looks like C, and you can tell it. Particular thing happened with languages that I don't speak perfectly. So I speak French and Spanish, and sometimes you can hear me having a stream of fluency in French, and then all of a sudden I start saying, how do you say this in French? And then I mix with Italian, English, Sardinian, whatever. And happens to me when I speak a shared language, which I speak quite well sometimes, but most of the time I mix with Perl. So, if you hear me talking, you can say that Italian is my native language, but there are places where Italian is not enough for me, so sometimes I use Sardinian because it's more convenient for me. So my ancestors tell me, when somebody hurts you, tell them something in this language, and that is in my genes, and it works this way. The same happens with English. I speak English fluently. Now, if you see this is the Declaration of Independence, so it's not the right flag to put the Union Jack there. This is the flag that was used when they wrote this text. But in English, you can find a lot of Italian, even though not many people know about this Italian being Italian. Many people think that it's English words. And again, in the right circumstances, I use Italian or I use Sardinian when needed. Same happens with computer languages. I use Perl fluently. Sometimes I need to mix some C because it's what I need at that moment. And since we are talking about speaking at the command line here, I speak shell script quite fluently, and most of the time I use Perl for that. Now, also the title promised you to talk about DBA needs. So, I'm a DBA, I use MySQL most of the time, and I wish I could say that I could speak Perl to the database fluently, but this is not the case. Most of the time I have to compromise with other languages. There are people who say that I can curse in Perl, and people say that Perl looks like cursing, but this is a matter for another talk. So, what are we going to do here? I'm going to show you how to mix languages, how to do this mixing at the command line, and let's start with the basics. So, what this tutorial is about. Most of that I will give you tips and tricks, some how-to, some very practical tips for you. And also, we will make the Go enthusiast green with envy. In case you are not very much familiar with the command line, let's go to the basics first. So, we're gonna have a shell. The shell is the program that receives your commands and then does something with your commands. Then we have the database client. In this case, is MySQL. And this client takes your commands and does something with the server. And then we have other tools that we can mix together. So we can have aliases that are for the shell. We can use Perl, we can use Oak, you can use sort, or you can use Perl for everything else like I usually do. Because 20 years ago it was fashionable to use Oak. Now everybody knows that Perl can do everything that Oak and sort can do, even better. So in case it's not clear, if you are a very beginner, command lines means writing a command, then using some parameters and the enter key. Sorry if this was clear for you, but sometimes I need to make it clear, otherwise somebody gets confused. The Unix philosophy is what gets you in business with the command line. So you need to have a tool, one tool that does one thing very well, and you have to mix the tools together. The tools must, or actually can, cooperate using the pipes. So you can have a sort, and then you can find the unique in those sorts, and then print them. Do you see these red things? I'm sorry, I didn't realize that this with this projector didn't look very good. Can you see that? Okay. So Unix pipes, what are they? You take an application, and the application can get the input from the keyboard or from some other place. The application will send the output to the standard output, and you can have an application that gets the input and the output from the standard output and the standard input. And finally, you can have an application that was input becomes, actually was output becomes the input of another application. The concept of Unix pipes means parallel processing. So when you start an application and you start producing output, the other application starts working immediately. It doesn't wait until the first application stops, until the first application finishes. So it starts processing the output, and then finally the first application finishes, and eventually the second one finishes. So this is a parallel processing, although not many people realize that. You think that it's serial, it's not. It's parallel. As soon as your application produces one character of output, the second one starts working. One thing that you should know is